Vielen Dank, Mike. Guten Abend. Mein Name ist Mark Ritson und mein heutiger Titel ist Alles hat ein Ende, nur der Wurst hat zwei. Entschuldigung. Alles hat ein Ende, nur die Wurst und das Marketing haben zwei. What I mean by that is, and forgive my English now, what I mean by that is that too often we face choices in marketing and we make choice one or choice two. When like the sausage, we actually have the gift of two different ends, two different, equally important perspectives are equally useful in our business of marketing. Let me explain with a simple example. Research. Many of us in marketing prefer our quantitative research. It's more scientific and rigorous with hard numbers and big data over the qualitative research of focus groups or ethnographic research. And it's easy to see why some people prefer quantitative, because qualitative research is fluffy. There's no numbers, no magnitude, no representation, no science. But the reality is that quantitative research is just as flawed for a very different reason. For example, I could do a survey now on all of the members of the APG and say, for the second half of my presentation today, I can give you two choices of how I will conclude this presentation. We could do option A, in which I would finish the presentation wearing only my swimwear, or option B, in which I would do the whole remaining part of the session completely naked. I would assume most of you, if you're sane, would go for option A. At least wear something, swimwear. And I would therefore take all my clothes off except for my swimwear, and I'd finish the session wearing my Speedos. And Mike or someone else at the APG would say, Mark, das ist not good. You cannot finish talking to our German members wearing your Speedos. And I would say to Mike, it's okay, Mike, chill out. I've got research from 100% of the audience that they wanted me in my Speedos. I'm giving the market what they want. You see my point? Quantitative research is flawed because it's only good as the options that you put into the survey in the first place. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is to be like the sausage and have two different points. You want qual. First of all, you need qualitative research to understand the market, to work out what is important, to discover the qualities. But then you need quant to measure those options and get some magnitudes and some causality. So you see how this works. The two sides of the sausage together actually make marketing much better. Let's do another one. Probably the most important recent discovery in the last 10 years in marketing is Field and Burnett's concept of long and short. That in order for brands to make the most money possible, they must combine long-term brand building with short-term performance marketing. And the logic behind this research, and indeed the data that supports it, is spectacular. So what Field and Burnett discovered about 10 years ago now is that all of us on this session, we want growth. Sales uplift over base. And that takes time. But what Field and Burnett have observed is there are two different avenues to growth, two different trajectories by which that's achieved. There's the short-term sales activation or performance marketing line, the short line. And as you can see here, what happens is we invest a little bit of money in direct marketing, in a promotion of some kind, in some kind of digital media. And while we're spending the money, investing the money, the sales line goes, woo! The minute we stop spending the money, however, the sales line goes, ooh. Now that's fine, because the amount of money we spent investing in that media, more than returns are good on that investment in the shape of increased sales. It's good news, right? But there's a second trajectory to growth, a longer, slower, more incremental path of brand building. Now, the point here isn't that the blue line is better than the red line. The point is you need both. The brand building line sets up growth over time and then makes the performance marketing line work better. But you do need both in order to be successful. If you just do the short stuff, or you spend too much money on the short stuff because of the ROI, what happens ironically is you make less money. You need them both. Yeah. And we even know what the right combination should be. Field and Burnett have looked into this in great detail, and they'll show you that in different sectors, the balance between brand building and short-term activation varies. But in the classic consumer goods industries, it should be about 60-40. 60% of your money should go on brand building and 40% should go on shorter-term performance marketing. Now, as we know in Germany and everywhere else, nobody is doing that. Most companies are spending 70, 80, 90% of their marketing budget on short-term, sales-based, activation-style performance marketing. And by the way, it's only getting worse. Recent research from the Financial Times says that most companies, that's the companies in the light green there, are actually shortening their cycles for marketing performance. So it's already too short and it's getting shorter. Why is that? When the theory is so clear and frankly inarguable. Well, when Field and Burnett present their data, this time variable is the loose construct. It's 2, 3, 4 years. Yeah? And when you look at things from a 2, 3, 4 year window, it's pretty obvious that you need both of these lines working together. But no company and no marketer looks at the world that way. Almost all of us are trapped within a 12-month window of performance. Many of us, it's even shorter than 12 months. And look what happens when we shorten things out. What we suddenly see in that 12-month window is two very different options. The red option of performance marketing is vastly superior, measured over 12 months, to the blue line of brand building. You'd be an idiot to put your money in brand building, because in 12 months, if the world only had 1 year left to exist, you'd put all your money in performance marketing. The return is 2 or 3 or 4 times the ROI of brand building. Now, of course, that's because ROI is a stupid variable, half stupid. It's great for working out the best short-term performance marketing tactics, but useless because it takes money out of brand building and puts it into performance marketing. Even though over a longer period of time, you would make far more money if you got the balance right. And of course, what happens in Germany, like everywhere else, is after the year is over, we do it all again, and again, and again, and we go on forever, making the mistake of thinking that the long term is stitching together lots of short-term windows. That's not how this works. So in Germany, like everywhere else, it's Groundhog Day most of the time. We keep forgetting the longer-term view that would match with the short to make us more successful. And I see 3 kinds of CMO working in marketing today. There's the type that comes from advertising agencies. She does a good job for a year, building the brand, taking the long-term brand building route. But within a year and a half, the numbers and the growth isn't there, and she gets fired. There's another type of CMO that we get from Google and from Facebook and from the digital world. He gets the short term working brilliantly. And for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, there is some growth, but then that flattens. And again, he gets fired. The CMO you're looking for is the man or woman who comes in and says, you know what? I think we should put 70% of our money on short term. Even though that's not optimal, I'm choosing 70% because I know I can protect 30% of my budget from ROI, dumb calculations, and invest in the brand. And then what she does after 2 or 3 years is we start to see that magical process. That magical process where the short-term performances provide enough money to keep the long-term brand building going for 2 or 3 years. As a result, the long-term brand building can now begin to support the short-term activation. Nothing makes search work better, for example, than a TV ad. This helps that work better. And this cycle of long and short starts to work. And at some point, our clever marketer says, now that I've got this working, I'll get closer to the 60-40 ratio that I truly believe we need to achieve. She's the smart one. The combination of long and short. When Field and Burnett wrote their great book, The Long and the Short, the most important word in that title is the word and. Long and short together make you more money. The 2 ends of the sausage are important. And while we're on this topic, let's add another one. Within long and short, there's also an insight about mass and targeting. When I was growing up in marketing in the 1980s and 90s, we followed guys like Ted Levitt from Harvard, who said basically you segment, you target, and you position, STP. You have to go after target segments. But over the last 10 years, the Dark Lord of Penetration himself, Byron Sharp, produced the Red Book of Doom, How Brands Grow, and made an incredibly strong case for saying, forget that. You should go after everyone in the category. Sophisticated mass marketing. If you're selling dog food, go after everyone that owns a dog. And his data has proved him to be largely correct. But he and I have been fighting over this again for a long time. About 4 years ago in London at the massive Festival of Marketing, he and I debated this concept. I made it the case for targeting, and he made the case for mass marketing. Now, I won the debate. I don't want to talk about that too much, but I did win the debate. I think in retrospect, both of us were wrong, and both of us were right. Let me explain. If you dig a bit deeper into Field and Minette's research, what you discover is for the red line, the short of it of performance marketing, it does actually work out that targeting existing customer segments still gives you the best short-term ROI than going after new customer segments or everyone in the market. I was right, targeting still works. But if you look at the brand building line, we find that Professor Sharp was correct, and essentially targeting everyone gives you a better return. What does this tell you? It tells you that actually you again want both ends of the sausage. When it comes to short-term sales performance activation, go for target segments. But when you do your brand building budget, what you need to be doing is going after everyone in the category. Top of funnel, brand building, mass. Further down the funnel, targeted, product-based, target-specific. And we see some good examples. If I talk to you about Dove, you'd think about their brand building campaign that was all about the master brand, targeting everyone, going with a very general and emotional message. All true, but it was only half their budget. They also at Unilever were spending half their budget on targeted, product-specific ads for particular kinds of, in this case, hair moisturizer. And the lesson here is you have one major brand campaign, but you have many different product campaigns aimed at different target segments at different parts of the year. You want both sides of the sausage. And while we're on the sausage, let's do another one. Differentiation and distinctiveness, the two D words. I don't know how to say them in German, but in English they mean very, very different things. So when we all, again, grew up in the 80s and 90s, we talked about differentiation, making my brand perceived to be different from the competition. But again, over the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of the distinctiveness word. And here, distinctiveness has got nothing to do with competitors. Do I come to mind? Am I noticed? Do I look like myself? Am I first and prominent in the mind of the customer? Do I pop up there when she thinks about the situation? That's distinctiveness. And there's no doubt, even from me, that this is the more important of the two Ds. Why do I say that? Look at the great work of Daniel Kahneman, and you see this metaphor of System 1 and System 2 processing. System 1 is fast, inefficient, automatic, almost subliminal. When you bought a coffee this morning, the barista said, would you like to have a cappuccino or would you like to have a cafe latte? And you said, cappuccino. You have no idea why, but you're certain that's what you wanted. That's a System 1 decision. System 2 is slow, conscious. We're explicitly aware of making those decisions. And this is the kind of thinking that comes out of qualitative and quantitative research. You might have said cappuccino with a System 1 thinking process, but you'll explain it to me in market research using bullshit System 2 rationalizations. And this is important because, and again, this is again a bullshit figure, but 70, 80, 90% of our decision making, especially in consumption, is using System 1 approaches. Therefore, we can go crazy about differentiation, but differentiation is a very conscious System 2 thing. Distinctiveness, coming to mind, is most of the battle that we face, and therefore it is the more important of the two Ds. And we've had it wrong for the last 50 years. We've said, okay, brand awareness, distinctiveness, salience coming to mind, but then what's your image? Are you differentiated? Differentiate or die. The reality is it's the other way round. And in reality, most of our efforts in marketing should be about simply coming to mind, because that is the main battle. And we need to get them into better proportions. Now, having said that, I still believe in differentiation, although I'm in a relative minority. Remember, differentiation was invented by Rossa Reeves in the 60s with the idea of a unique selling proposition. M&Ms were the candy that would melt in your mouth, not in your hands, and that was unique to M&Ms. I mean, it was largely bullshit, but everyone tried to find a USP. 10 years later, Reese and Trout invented positioning. They said there's no such thing as a unique difference, but you can own an attribute in the mind of the marketplace. FedEx can own the concept of being overnight. Other delivery services offer it, but we are most associated with it. Then, of course, again, the Dark Lord turned up and said, differentiation, I don't think it's really that important. And then we have Simon Sinek on the other end of the spectrum saying brand purpose and differentiation is everywhere. So we're a bit confused at the moment as to what exactly it is. So let me give you my take on the whole thing. I think you can still have relative differentiation, okay? That's where, bing, I sit. Relative to three things. First of all, relative to salience, coming to mind, being distinctive. The main challenge is still popping into the head. But once that happens, I still think the image has some level of importance. Second, relative to competitors. You can't have something unique. You can't even own an attribute. But what you can do is have a stronger association for the 2 or 3 associations you want to be associated with versus competitors. And finally, relative to the other brand associations in your positioning. It isn't just one attribute. There are the 3 or 4 that make up a strong brand position. I believe that is possible to create an identity from that combination of relative associative strength. Getting close to our end. Another two-ended sausage, media and creative. When the Effie Awards turned 50 last year, I was invited by the Effies in US to analyze all of the submissions for every Effie submission ever made. And so I looked at as many submissions as I could, in this case about 4,500, and I looked at, do these submissions talk more about the creative, the content of the ad, pink, or do they talk about creative and media equally, the green? Now, if you go back before 2010, it roughly looks like this all the way back through the noughties and 90s. But as we go through this decade that's just passed, something different starts to happen. We get a third category, which is the black one, media dominant. That's a submission that talks more about the media than it does about the creative. Yeah, so these things are more about, this is my media strategy, more than the actual ads that the media strategy carried. And here's what happens over the last decade as we study what proportion was submitted for Effies. Look at this. You see that big bloom in the middle of the last decade? That was a real moment where we had brand safety, digital versus traditional, programmatic. People really began to focus more on media, the pipe that we stuff things into, than the content or the ad that's actually in the media. We became obsessed with it, right? If you do still digital media to this day, there's far more time spent on maximizing the targeting than the tiny little bit of work that goes on with the creative at the end. This led to David Abbott, one of the most famous British creative directors of all time, making one of the most famous quotes of all time, which I will attempt to give you in auf Deutsch. Scheiße, die mit Lichtgeschwindigkeit ankommt, ist immer noch scheiße. Yeah? Shit that is delivered at light speed is still shit. The point is, it's great if you've got all this targeting going on, hyper-targeting, hyper-personalization, but if the ad itself is shit, then everything is scheiße. The creative, the content is still important. A couple of years ago, Nielsen looked at what were the drivers of advertising effect. They found that brand was 15%, reach 22%, recency 5%, targeting 9%. The media context was 2%, but a whopping 47% of it was, what do you know? Is the ad any good? Imagine that. Half the impact of advertising comes from the ad itself, not the media that carries it. If you go home tonight and tell your husband or wife that you learned that, they'd say, well, that's bloody obvious. It is to everyone except marketers that got obsessed with media. Nothing wrong with thinking about media, but don't forget, creative is as important, probably more so. And finally, that takes us to digital and traditional media. What a stupid thought. Digital marketing, digital media. What the fuck does that mean? Find me a medium that isn't digital anymore. Radio's digital, TV's digital, outdoors digital. everything's traditional. And we spent 10 years having a stupid fight about digital versus traditional when there was an obvious answer. So again, in my Effie's research, I looked at what's the optimum number of channels to get the most effectiveness, yeah? I really didn't know the answer. Is it 2 or 4 or 5? How many channels gives you the optimum effectiveness? Looking across, again, almost 5,000 campaigns. This is what the data said. Basically, that trend line is continuing to go up. It's very hard to get data to do that, right? The more media, the more channels, the better. More is actually more. And I'm not the first person to find this out. The wonderful research firm Analytic Partners looked at, again, about 3,000 campaigns over 5 years and looked at what happens when you go from a single media campaign, could be Facebook, could be TV or radio, to a double media campaign. So let's say we add a second platform, whatever that platform might be. On average, controlling for the budget, we go up by 19 points, yeah? Plus 19% effectiveness just by adding a second medium. If you add 3 mediums together, you go to 23 over a single medium. Add 4, you get to plus 31. Add 5 media together, you get to 135 versus 100 for 1. More is more. Whichever way you think about it, whichever media you're comparing, A times B in a campaign is always better than 2A or 2B. You want both ends of the sausage, and that tells you something else. It tells you that it's stupid to talk about digital or traditional, Facebook or TV, search or radio. You know what the answer is? The answer is both ends of the sausage. It's ja. Ja will ha both of them. Yeah? The answer is yes. Digital, traditional. What a load of shit. Take them both. And the answer again lies in more Analytic Partners data. Look, when you add any media to another media, you get synergy. Yeah? 2 ends of a sausage are better than 1. So, that's my argument to you. Alles hat ein Ende, nur die Weist und das Marketing haben zwei. Also, im Gegensatz zur Wurst habe ich nur ein Ende, also so zurück zu dir im Studio. Dankeschön.